Hi everyone, welcome to this presentation that will give you some tips and tricks on how to actually create an outdoor space that's good for you, that's good for birds, and is good for other wildlife. This presentation is really geared towards meeting people with where they're at on their conservation journey. Maybe you're just starting or maybe you're further along, but we do hope to help you help birds by giving you practical, actionable information that you can take home to start recreating nature at your doorstep today. So first and foremost, I'm not going to assume why everyone thinks Birds Canada would actually be involved with gardening for birds. But since we are an environmental, non-government, nonprofit organization, we do focus on conserving wild birds through sound science, innovative partnerships, science-based advocacy, public engagement, and many different other options. We strive to really be Canada's voice for birds, and that does include everyone from all backgrounds everywhere. And in our work, we've really noticed the power that comes with empowering people to be part of the conservation movement to help birds and helping ourselves, which led us to create our Gardening for Birds program, a way that everyone can help birds at their own homes. And today I'm sitting in my home on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation of the Anishinaabe people, which includes Guelph in southern Ontario. It's situated on treaty lands, which has much rich Indigenous history and is home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. And since there are so many uses of plants, whether it's medicine, food for us or wildlife, or just creating an attractive outdoor space, it really is amazing seeing different gardens in my area being grown with the intention of strengthening those local Indigenous communities through traditional gardening methods and seeing these examples in different places. But speaking about different uses of plants, I'm curious, what do you think of when you see these photos? Do you see an attractive outdoor space with showy flowers? Can you imagine hearing the buzzing of pollinators in life, the singing of birds? I know many of us are experiencing winter right now. And so, can you put yourself into this area, into this mindset of hearing that life? And while we sit here in winter, what do you think about when you picture a garden? What interests you about gardening? Is it attracting wildlife? Is it helping pollinators? Maybe just creating that attractive outdoor space that you can enjoy. Or maybe you're more interested in the plants themselves. And thankfully, you can get all of these things and more through gardening for birds. So why are we talking about gardening for birds? As we all know, nature is under threat. There's many forests, grasslands, wetlands. They've been cleared, lost, or degraded to make way for infrastructure, for agriculture, for other purposes. And that habitat loss is really contributing to species declines. But the really great news is that we can help. You can help. You can use the outdoor spaces, whether they're large or small in your area, and especially in fast growing population centers we can use those to bring back some habitat for birds and other wildlife through gardening. So this photo shows a yellow warbler in spring during its annual migration back to us from its overwintering grounds. And if you look at that map at the bottom right, you can see the different colors on the map or the shaded areas. If you look for areas of yellow, that's a lower relative abundance or a lower number of birds. Purple or dark purple is that great relative abundance, a higher number of birds. And then if you look at week of the year and JFM, etc., January, February, March. So in the winter, in January, February, you can see that yellow warblers are down south. When I play this, you can see that once we come to April and May, yellow warblers are making that huge migratory trek back to us in the US, in Canada, specifically southern Ontario, before they move back down again south in the fall and where they spend their winter. Imagine walking from Panama to Thunder Bay in a month or two. Imagine how exhausting that would be. Imagine having to do that as a tiny little bird. I would wish for great weather, for free food, for water, access to shelter if it was me. And if we're able to really provide that crucial life saving resources for these birds to help make that journey a little bit easier while also helping the birds that live with us year round stay happy and healthy, that's a really great thing that we can do. And when you do start getting curious about your outdoor space, and say you could easily plant one of two species. One's good for birds and the other one not so much. We can decide to choose plants that help birds and also increase the diversity of your own backyard so you will be more likely to see beautiful birds like the yellow warbler right next to your home. So, how do we do this? How do we actually garden for birds? By keeping three things at the forefront of your mind when you're planning your garden, you can really make a difference in a short amount of time, even if you're starting small. Food, water, shelter. What we need to physically survive, birds do too. And we also need to think about providing food, water, and shelter for these birds throughout the seasons, not just in spring and summer, but also especially in these colder months. Food can come in many different forms, from the pine grosbeak eating, the seeds and keys of green ash, to black and white warblers, which you can see eating insects that may have come from a flower that attracts many different insects for birds to use as food, to the American robin that's eating fruit. We just suggest trying to incorporate native species into your garden, the ones that naturally occur in your region, because birds have coexisted with those native plants for so long that the native species can really help increase insect diversity, for example, that birds can use for food. But it's not just what they eat, it's when. If we look at these pictures, that they're either taken at or represent different times of the year. The pine grosbeak in the fall, the black and white warbler with its insect meal in the spring and summer, and the American robin feasting on berries of an American mountain ash, those berries actually stick around from August all the way into winter. Think about your walks outside in winter right now, and you might come across some bright red clumps of berries that are still on the trees. That acts as food for birds. So here are some more examples of plants you could consider planting for providing food throughout the seasons. There are many different types of service berries that flower and provide berries in the spring, and they're also great for insect pollinators. The group of dogwoods, like the gray dogwoods pictured here, those amazing pink stems contrasting with those white berries, they add visual interest to your garden, and birds devour the berries later in the summer and fall. My supervisor has actually had multiple species of dogwoods, and the white-throated sparrows during their fall migration actually pick them clean. And thinking back to that American robin eating the American mountain ash, a species that does produce those beautiful bright red clusters of berries later in the summer, and then keeps them all the way into the winter to provide food when it's colder and when it's harder to find food for birds and wildlife. And even more food diversity throughout the season. Flowers. Cute little wild columbines, the flower in the spring attracts insects, which act as food for birds that eat insects. Butterfly milkweed or other species of milkweed, we know that they can help monarch butterflies and other pollinators, but they can provide nectar for hummingbirds in addition to attracting insects. And then transitioning to species like goldenrods or other fall blooming showy flowers, which don't actually really influence allergies, but they clearly do help pollinators. So think about how you want to design your outdoor space to have color year round in different forms to provide food like holding on to seed heads or cones for birds and other wildlife. On to our next crucial life-saving element that you can include in your garden for birds, water. Incorporating a water feature into your garden, it's a really great way to attract more birds. Regardless of size or type, these features provide drinking water, bathing locations, rehydrating stations. The water feature can really be of diverse forms, from bird baths to ponds, but it is important to keep the water cool and clean if possible, either through a filtration system or really just changing the water and cleaning it regularly if you do have a bird bath. We know water features naturally come in many different forms, and incorporating that water feature into your garden, it's a great way to attract more birds. If you think about water naturally, think about how you can bring that to your garden on a fairly small scale. You can see in these photos, you have a water feature that has some vegetation grown up around it, or maybe it's just a brand new pond that you've installed. Regardless, again, of the size or type, these can help blue jays, these can help chipmunks, and it can really, really help create a space where birds feel safe drinking, rehydrating, especially if we're thinking about those migratory species that are making a trek that's thousands and thousands of kilometers long. If you are adding a bird bath, though, just make sure they don't become stalking grounds for outdoor cats, because that won't necessarily end well. And wet areas, they provide an opportunity for other plants to grow that enjoy these more saturated conditions. And also building up areas around water features, artificial or otherwise, to provide a sheltered habitat where the birds can fly into after they bathe can help too. So here is a few more examples of species that you could consider planting in wetter areas. They have beautiful showy flowers that provide benefits to birds and pollinators, and they're attractive to us too. And just FYI, we will be presenting a way at the end of the presentation for you to learn more about these plants a little later on. But this is just a quick teaser of the different species and different groups of plants that you could consider planting around water features or in more saturated conditions. Lastly, shelter. Birds might choose specific habitat features to avoid detection from predators or for protection from the elements. So, to reduce their detectability and increase their safety, we can provide shelter in the forms of trees for this ruby throated hummingbird, clusters of shrubs for species like swamp sparrow, or dense ground cover for species that nest or are around the ground, like savannas or song sparrows. This can allow for birds to move more safely during migration, forage within their home range, defend their territory, and provide sheltered habitat where they can safely nest and roost throughout the year. So if you look at your neighbor's property and maybe they have tall trees that won't let you develop a huge sun-loving pollinator garden, you can turn that constraint into an opportunity and develop more of a forested habitat instead. Or maybe you want to try to complement their trees with a more open area. So thinking about the diversity and the structure of your outdoor space, as well as how to provide shelter habitat for birds, can be really helpful. Forests develop naturally in layers. You do have that forest floor near the bottom. Higher up, you have those shrubs and those shorter trees, followed by the top of that tree canopy. Birds also take advantage of these different heights and structure, as we've seen previously. Cerulean warblers, for example, foraging on the very tops of those trees, or maybe you have eastern towhees hiding in the shrubs, or savanna sparrows nesting on the ground. So bringing that natural structure diversity into the plan for your outdoor space can really help. Planting from the bottom up. So here again are some examples of species that you could consider planting that will grow in each of those structural categories. Ferns, some herbaceous species for the forest floor to provide some shelter for birds that are often found near the ground. Then maybe some understory shrubs with beautiful flowers and provide some interest at our eye level. All the way to those taller trees for those birds that stay closer to the tall canopies. White pines, for example, they have those cones year round. They can provide food for birds like crossbills or nuthatches year round. And then adding some interesting deciduous trees as well can increase the structural interest, the diversity to cater to a variety of different species that have different habitat preferences. And specifically highlighting the wild ginger photo. Wild ginger itself is a great plant, but if you see that leaf litter in the photo and also that rock, again, adding more structural diversity and complexity to your outdoor space, we might not necessarily think about leaf litter in the context of a garden, but think about birds that are going along that ground, that are maybe looking for insects in the leaf litter that might feel a little bit more safe, and then they perch up on that rock for a little bit more of a height difference to see around, looking for predators, singing. So again, just adding those structural diversity, that complexity to your garden can help increase the diversity of birds that you have. And also thinking about structure within the trees and within the plants themselves. Common hackberry, for example, has a really interesting bark that can help species like brown creeper, nuthatches, woodpeckers, black and white warbler find insects along the ridges of that bark. And it adds that extra layer of complexity and interest to your outdoor space. All of this is to say, make a plan before buying plants. Where in your yard do you want a conifer corner for year-round cover and cones? Do you want an area with a small butterfly garden or a sun-loving pollinator area? Where does it make sense to add a water feature, a bird bath? Making a plan first by figuring out the different sun, soil, moisture conditions in your yard, that can really help you be successful with your plant selections and your garden plan. What we're really talking about is developing a structurally, aesthetically interesting garden. Lawns are lacking biologically. There really isn't much wildlife that can survive on a lawn, and they also can require a lot of costly maintenance for us. But this is a property where the owner decided to reduce the lawn cover and start a native plant garden. So I want you to imagine that you're on the other side of the fence looking into where the guys are working. And I want everyone to guess in their head, how long do you think it took to go from this lawn to this garden? Do you think maybe it only took a month, only a year, or maybe upwards of, 3 to 5 years or more than 7? In fact, going from this lawn to this garden took a year. Took only 1 year. In 1 year, this lawn was turned into this amazing, thriving, aesthetically interesting, life giving garden. This huge butterfly garden that provides nectar. It provides pollinator habitat. It provides seed heads for birds like sparrows in the fall and winter. An amazing example of what is very, very doable, even on a very small scale in a short period of time. So, say we've convinced you, say you have a plan. What do you plant? Well, do you live anywhere on this map, specifically in southern Ontario, near the Niagara region? If you do, then we have plant recommendations for you based on your garden environment to help make your yard more bird friendly. Consulting with an expert horticulturalist, Kevin Kavanagh, we came up with a way to break up Canada into what we call bird garden zones. Number one is in the Yukon, and number 22 is all the way over in the island of Newfoundland. These bird garden zones take into account the cold conditions that plants will have to endure in the winter, different ecoregions, climate, geography, bird diversity regions, and it has all been combined to create these bird garden zones that essentially cover all of Canada and parts of the northern US. So, with that in mind, the Niagara region specifically is in what we call Bird Garden Zone 16, or the Carolinian Forest region. Birdgardens.ca, it's Birds Canada's new resource to help you help birds and help me help birds because I am not an expert gardener. It's a website dedicated entirely to giving you information on how to plan your garden, what to think about when designing or adding to your outdoor space to make it more bird friendly, to give you that regionally tailored, appropriate advice for your space, and help you select native, naturally occurring plant species to help create birds. And it's really part of this 3 step process. The plant selector that we have, it has over 500 native plants covering Canada and that part of the northern US, and it allows you to create customized list of plants based on your location, what type of plant you're interested in, what wildlife features, maybe you want berries or nectar or cones. We also do have regionally tailored fact sheets for each bird garden zone. And for example, for Zone 16, the Carolinian forests, we have a list of 10 plants on that fact sheet that you could consider planting. We also have different videos discussing some of the topics we've mentioned today, but in more detail with some real life examples. And remember that garden that grew that much in 1 year? The videos on the website feature some scenes from that garden after only a few months, so you can really see how it took off. On birdgardens.ca, we essentially have that 3 step process, like I mentioned. The first step is making that plan. Get curious about your outdoor space. What are the different sun, soil, and moisture conditions in the different areas of your yard? But also wanting people to think about things like that seasonal and structural diversity throughout the year. Second, where is your bird garden zone? And so maybe you can look at this static map on the website and determine which zone you're in. Niagara, again, is in zone 16. If you can't locate yourself on that static map, feel free to use the interactive map where you can type in your address, your postal code. You can just click on the map or use your device's GPS to pinpoint your location in real time. Or you can share this with your friends who live outside of zone 16, for example. Once you've memorized your bird garden zone number, navigate to the plant selector page, which is honestly where the fun happens. So this example is just going to show you a really quick tutorial, but if you're interested in a longer tutorial, you can go to our plant selector page and click how to use the plant selector, which will pop up a longer tutorial. So say that you've made your plan and you know that you're in zone 16. Maybe you want a herbaceous species, so you navigate to herbs. You scroll down, you punch in your zone 16 for bird garden zone. You can see actually that it's also sorting for, you see wild columbine, butterfly milkweed, which we've already talked about. You can customize your list based on all of the different fields on the left side. You can choose your different wildlife features and more. Once you're happy with the list that live filters, click on a species that you're interested in. Western yarrow, for example. Scroll down, view some more photos, and a variety of information that will help you determine if it's good for your site. If you're happy with it, you can add it to your list, essentially like a shopping cart. When you want to navigate to your list, click on that yellow heart, and there you go. Your list has started to be created. And I've also included Boost Maple, which is from a previous list that I was creating. So once you create your list, you can print it off, you can send it to yourself, you can share it to yourself, or you can find your local nursery so you can actually start gardening for birds today. Gardening is a really fantastic way to recreate that habitat at our own doorsteps, but there are some other things we can do in tandem or all on their own to help birds. Thinking about things like glass, mirrors, and windows. I have walked into a glass door before. Birds also have a hard time perceiving glass. And imagine flying again those thousands and thousands of kilometers for your migration. You're exhausted, it's nighttime, there's lights everywhere, and you fly into a window. To reduce the influence of glass on bird mortality, there are really simple ways to break up that reflection. You can purchase products from Feather Friendly. You can use an oil based Sharpie to draw on the outside of those windows. There's a great example at the University of British Columbia that reduced bird mortality by a significant amount by just having students draw on the windows. And it honestly really works. Some gardeners are actually adding mirrors and glass to their gardens, which has that same effect. So, removing mirrors and glass from gardens, breaking up how reflective the glass is, then also ensuring that the glass doesn't look like you could fly straight through the window, it helps birds and it helps reduce the millions and millions of birds that die every year just because of window collisions. Another easy thing to do is use bird friendly coffee. Coffee certified by the Smithsonian Institute ensures that the coffee plantations you're purchasing from haven't cut down their forests to make way for coffee plants, so that birds actually have a home to return to when they migrate south. You can also purchase sustainable lumber, paper, forestry products from FSC, the Forest Stewardship Council, and that can also help ensure that we're protecting their habitat on their breeding grounds. Supplementing with feeders and roost nest boxes can also add to the allure of your outdoor space. If you want to turn your hobby of watching birds into conservation action, you can also sign up for Project Feeder Watch, which is happening right now. A variety of different feeders. Honestly, if you just want to start, you can just buy black oil sunflower seed. That is kind of the go to option for supplementing with bird feeders. And last but not least, cats are good at what they do, and that includes hunting birds. Outdoor cats are a threat to birds and other wildlife, so keeping them indoors and also keeping the cats away from predators and diseases helps them and it also helps wildlife. My supervisor has had multiple cats that he's transitioned from an outdoor lifestyle that he's found a feral cat and transitioned them into an indoor cat, and they're doing just fine. It'll keep them healthier, it'll keep you happy, it'll keep them happy, and it'll keep the birds around. So that's it for me. Thank you so much for being willing to learn about how we can use our outdoor spaces for the benefit of birds, wildlife, and us. An outdoor space that is good for birds, it doesn't mean it can't be beautiful. It can easily be both. Food, water, shelter. How can we provide this for birds in the fall and winter and also throughout the year? My partner and I, we are really excited to start turning our lawn dominated landscape that we moved into a more bird friendly garden. And we're really happy to help you help birds as you start or further your own journey. I also wanted to give a special mention to Wild Birds Unlimited, who has supported this work, and they not only provide bird feeders for birds, but they're really interested in also finding different ways, including gardening for birds, to save the songbirds. Thanks all, and feel free to start gardening for birds today by visiting birdgardens.ca. And if you have any questions, please feel free to find me on birdscanada.org. My name's Natasha Barlow, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.